Hi, I'm Dr. Billy Retzlaff, and welcome back to ABA-ish. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is understanding setting events. This is something that I am so passionate about, and it's super important when you're interacting with other people to know and understand what setting events are and how they impact behavior. Specifically, today we're going to be talking about setting events in the context of challenging behavior. And then I'm also going to make just a few quick comments on self-care because it kind of relates to how I talk about setting events. So, this is something that I think is really applicable whether you're a caregiver or an educator. It's something that all of us actually should understand for our interactions with other people and sometimes for understanding yourself. So, regardless of your kind of role, I hope that you find this video to be really helpful. Okay, so to start, what is a setting event? A setting event is something that happens prior to a behavior of concern that impacts the likelihood of that behavior. Now, when we talk about setting events, we actually want to make sure we distinguish these from antecedents. So, the antecedent to a behavior of concern is usually the thing that happens right before that behavior. So, common antecedents might be saying no. So, your kid asks if they can have something, you tell them no, and all of a sudden you get some problematic behavior. The antecedent would be telling them no. Maybe presenting work at school is an antecedent to avoidance behavior, to refusal and saying no and leaving the classroom. That antecedent is presenting that work. Setting events are things that happen a little bit more temporally distant because they're more bigger picture things that impact behavior. So let me give you a few examples which might help. Common setting events might be things like sleep. So, did you get enough sleep the night before? If not, you may be more likely to engage in problematic behavior. Hunger. If you're feeling hungry, you might have more problematic behavior compared to if you've just recently eaten. Medications. Have medications been taken as prescribed? Are the medications functioning within the individual as the prescribing physician hoped for? Your physical health. How are you feeling? Do you have a headache? Is your stomach bothering you? Those are things that can make it more likely that you would see problematic behavior. Mental health. So, is somebody experiencing excessive worry or concern? Somebody experiencing anxiety, symptoms of depression? All of those things can impact the likelihood of behavior from a bigger picture. Same with social interactions. If a student comes to school and the night before they had a ton of negative interactions with their caregiver, or maybe they were even just present while caregivers were fighting with each other, that can impact their behavior the next day. If you have a kid who's just getting off the bus and they had a really difficult interaction with a teacher as their last thing that happened at school, that might have a bigger impact on their day. So, it might be that usually the kid comes home and you ask them to do their homework and they do it just fine. But one day they come home, you ask them to do your homework, the antecedent is the same, and they throw a huge tantrum. And you don't really understand why because it looks exactly the same as it had always looked, but it has something to do with this interaction that they had a while ago. So the idea here is that setting events are these bigger picture conditions or events that impact the likelihood of behavior. Now, when I talk to people about setting events, I really like to use the bottle analogy. So, what I mean by this is imagine that we all have this bottle, and when the bottle overfills, that's when you start to see our frustrations and challenging behavior. So, what setting events do is they determine how full the bottle is when we start our interaction with the individual. So, let's use the example of a student in a school. So, say we have a kid who comes into school and they didn't sleep well the night before, they weren't able to eat their breakfast, and maybe they're having some negative interactions at home with their caregiver. Their bottle might be really, really full, and we might ask them to do one small academic thing, and all of a sudden we get a ton of inappropriate behavior. That can feel kind of weird because we only asked one small thing, yet we got a big explosion, right? Then on a different day, that same student might have slept really well the night before, gotten to eat their breakfast, and maybe home life has settled down. There's not those negative interactions. You ask them to do the same thing that you asked them to do the day before, and they handle it just fine because their bottle isn't as full. And so when we've asked them to do that academic work, it might add a little bit to their bottle, but it's not spilling over the top because there was room for it versus the other day when the bottle came to school all the way filled up. Even though we were only adding a little bit to it, it was still too much. The bottle overfilled. So if we think about setting events that way, we can kind of understand sometimes that the same situation in the moment might produce a different behavior because of these bigger overarching things that are impacting the individual's behavior. Now, some important things to know is that most of the time our bottles are opaque. So that means that other people don't know how full they are. You can't see through them, right? So I don't have the luxury of looking at somebody and being able to say, whoa, their bottle is really full. I'm going to be careful not to add anything to it today. Usually, the way we figure that out is because of what we experience. Now, sometimes as we get to know people better, we can start to see through their bottles a little bit. So, with your own child, you may start to notice that they seem hungry or tired. They may have signs that help you see through that bottle and see that it's filling up. If you know a student and you've worked with them well, same thing. You might start to get these little cues or these little things that help you know, hey, it seems like their bottle is really full today. But for the most part, most people's bottles to start with are pretty opaque and we can't see through them. So we need to think about setting events when we're trying to support kids, right? We have to understand that these bigger picture things can impact their behavior. Sometimes this explains variability in behavior. So, why some days something is really challenging for a student, but the next day it doesn't seem as challenging, and kind of that back and forth. Sometimes that can be explained by a setting event. Sometimes a setting event can explain the magnitude of behavior. And so, it's really important that we consider these things when we're supporting our students. And specifically, there's three things I like to try to do. So the first one is I like to try to help them keep their bottles as empty as possible. This makes me things like making sure we have systems in place to meet their basic needs. So if a student needs to eat, making sure that we have a system at the school to make sure that they can get that food in them. At my own home, this is why I try to make sure my son doesn't miss his nap, right? Because I don't want that setting event of him being tired to impact his behavior. So I'm going to try and do the things I can to keep a bottle as empty as possible. If I'm supporting an individual who takes medication, I'm going to do what I can to stay on the right schedule of that medication, give the proper dose at the proper time so that that's not a setting event. If there is a lot of tension or negativity going on in my household, I'm going to do what I can to try to shield my kid from experiencing that. Again, trying to keep their bottle as empty as possible. The next thing we need to do is teach people how to manage when their bottle is full. So, if you want to go check out my video that talks about replacement skills and regulation skills, that's what these are. So, to me, it's teaching them what are the appropriate behaviors you can do when your bottle is filling up and spilling over. And what are the things that you can do to self regulate in that situation? How do we manage when our bottle is too full? The other thing that I love to teach is how do you empty your bottle? How do you poke some holes in it so that the liquid comes out and that you don't get too full? How do you pour it out when it is really full? How do you empty that bottle, right? So, how do you take all those setting events that have been building and building and building and bring them down? So for me, I always talk about it as self care is the things that we do to empty our bottle, or sometimes even really good proactive self care might make our bottle bigger or poke those holes in it so that we can manage more things. So, this is why it's really important to understand that self care isn't one specific thing. There's not one thing that's going to empty my bottle and your bottle in every single situation. In fact, even the things that help me empty my bottle today might be different than what empty my bottle tomorrow because my bottle might be filled up with different things. So, things like mindfulness and gratitude practices, those are amazing because I think those are the kind of things that either make our bottle bigger or poke those long term holes in it, right? They make us less likely to hold on to all of those setting events and have them have big impacts on our behavior. So, when we're talking about self care, though, you have to just remember, like I said, it's not one size fits all, and it's not one thing is always the right thing to empty your bottle. So, for example, some days how I might engage in self care and empty my bottle a little bit might be to make a prioritized to do list to help get myself organized and on track. That might feel good and empty my bottle a little bit. But on other days, maybe I go read a book and I completely disengage and forget about my to-do list. That can be self-care too. So those things are very different, but they can be both can be self-care. Same, maybe spending time with some friends is a way that I'm engaging in self-care and that helps me empty my bottle. Or maybe it's saying no to that social engagement. That might be the thing that helps me recharge and empty my bottle a little bit. For some people or some situations, it might be a really high intensity workout, helps me empty my bottle, whereas other times maybe it's something more calm like practicing yoga or taking a walk. sometimes talking about your stresses with somebody else can help you empty your bottle. Or maybe you want to journal on your own and kind of do that in that more private manner. So it's not one size fits all. It's not one strategy fits all. The important thing is thinking about what is going on with you right now, or your student or your kid right now, and how can we help them empty that bottle a little bit so that those setting events are having less of an impact on their behavior. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, please subscribe and share. It helps me so much to support continue doing this, offering events and other things. Is if you can really support through your subscription and your sharing. I hope everyone has a great day, and don't forget, if you have a question, go ahead and follow the form in my show description so that I can hear what it is. Bye.